Hello, this is Debbie Reynolds of the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we talk with industry leaders around the world related to data privacy issues and things that businesses need to know now. Today, I'm very happy and proud to have my friend and mentor, Mike Bryant from Knox Capital Holdings. He's a partner in the venture capital company here in the U.S. We had a great conversation, and actually Mike and I had this podcast recorded. It was a bit after the U.S. presidential election, where election day had passed, but it was during the week that we did not actually know who won the election. So some of the talk that we have is about sort of before or after the election, but Mike had some really interesting things to say about what he thought would be happening after the election, as it relates to regulation, data privacy stuff. We talked a bit about antitrust and the big tech companies, as well as some other stories about our time working together, as well as some of the other things that he sees in the future related to investing and in what investors look for when they're trying to put money into companies. So this is a great podcast, and enjoy. Thank you, Mike, for being here.
Thank you, Debbie. Always great to see you.
I love to talk a little bit about your business journey. So you're very much a builder. You're like a mover, a shaker, a builder, and then you like to spin off things and like move to the next thing. And you just sort of climbed your own ladder, I feel, in your career. I love to hear just a little bit about your trajectory.
Sure. Well, some of this history, because we spent several years together on this journey, but I grew up at a time in the mid 80s where it was typical to start at a big company. And that's where the path that I took and looked at Eastman Kodak Company, IBM, Xerox, kind of were the big three that I was focused on, even kind of through undergrad. And I had interned at Eastman Kodak. And when I was applying at Kodak, they were really driving growth in their B2B division. And I drew what I thought was a short straw at the time. And my first assignment after 16 weeks of training was to tackle the legal market in the upper Midwest, Minneapolis. So I didn't know really anything about how lawyers worked and how law firms worked. And at the time, based on the type of role that I was in, I really needed to understand how law firms made money and really the entire workflow. So I immersed myself in it. I was fascinated by it and really developed a knack for that market at Kodak. And it served me well. I was promoted into a new division at Kodak that was more service-oriented, where just like IBM and Xerox, Kodak got into the services game. And really it was a way to wrap outsourcing solutions around equipment and systems. And the legal market was my vertical focus, as a dozen of us or so left the systems group to form and drive the growth of what was called Kodak Imaging Services. And I really got hooked on not just the legal market, but services in general, and particularly technology-enabled services, which led me to kind of a jumping off point after 8 years in the systems group and 3 years in the services side. I moved over to Donnelly Enterprise Solutions, which was it was a spin-out startup inside of our Donnelly, hyper-focused on the legal market and the bulge bracket investment banks. Two of the most type A clients you can find, very demanding. And we embraced it. And, my role in that business was to start an IT outsourcing group. And, it was fun to be part of a startup within a startup. And that business, as you recall, because I think that's about the time that we started to work together, was a company that we took public. And then ultimately we were bought off the public markets by another public company, Bound, which is when I moved to New York and really started to get more familiar with private equity and M&A in general. We started to buy businesses and integrate them into the bigger company. So that was kind of the initial journey, but I'll pause there because I recall when we worked together, one of the things that I loved about you so much is that we were growing so quickly and launching adjacent service lines. And I always remember talking to you about new opportunities, saying, Debbie, I have an opportunity for you. And, you were always willing to jump in to a new growth area, a new service line. And I think we were one of the first services companies that put together a litigation support offering for big law, and you managed that engagement, that operation for what was then, if I recollect, Sonnenschein, Nath, and Rosenthal before they became part of the juggernaut that is now Denton's. But you always raised your hand and jumped in. I appreciate that.
And Sidley and Austin, I did that.
Yes, yeah.
Your path, though, in your career, it really has been about digital transformation. So it's been about taking people from maybe the old way they're doing things and sort of changing or shifting the ways they're doing things. But I feel like data was very much the center of that. What do you think?
Yeah, no doubt. I think what I realized at a certain point is that if you could enable service offerings with technology underpinnings, you created a much tighter relationship with the client. And when you could get to the point where you knew more about their business than they knew about their business and the particular areas that you were touching through some of the unique metrics that you could bring to bear, it really tightened the bond and you became indispensable. So, I do think that, it was during that period that, I realized that, I needed to spend more time on technology companies, pure play software businesses. And we began to make that pivot at Bound. And then ultimately, I really enjoyed working with the entrepreneurs that we would identify and purchase their companies and integrate into the bigger business. So when we sold Bound Business Solutions to Williams Lee, that was kind of a natural jumping off point to get more entrepreneurial and ultimately move in the direction of investing in technology companies and investing in service companies now at Knox. And you don't have to look much further, Debbie, to some of the software companies in the electronic discovery space are so impressive to see the growth and Relativity, for instance, is rumored to be in discussions with Nuix at this time. And when you put those two companies together to just contemplate the scale, if that combination were to come off, you'd have a $400 million business with 30% profit levels, 120 million of EBITDA. That is phenomenal. And, to think that it wasn't that long ago that I was sitting in a tiny office subleased from Skadden with Andrew Saja as he was starting off the company. And now that business is worth in excess of likely $3 billion a year. So, to see just the growth of, the electronic discovery software players alone, it's phenomenal.
Yes, excellent. I agree. It is interesting to see how it's become. I mean, it was a business that didn't really have a name for a long time, right? Before eDiscovery sort of came along. So we were kind of doing it before it had an official name. It's like full-fledged, business line, and a lot of people know about it and talk about it. I'd love to talk with you about your experience in buying companies and selling companies, and the considerations that come across your desk related to, possibly due diligence related to like cybersecurity or data privacy. Like, what concerns come up that people talk to you about?
At one time, when doing diligence on a company, a lot of the focus was on, I would say, financial. There was a financial work stream where you would, validate the company's earnings, and you would do a quality of earnings test, basically, through a third party. You would also do, there's a legal work stream where you're looking at all the, kind of the documents in the company. You're looking at insurance. There's an operational work stream always, and that's the part that I typically get involved with, as well as a technology third-party work stream. And what's new, however, as part of that technology work stream, because oftentimes we're buying companies that they have, if they're not a software company, a pure play software company, they're certainly a services business that has technology enablement. So we're really looking at any technology assets they have. What we are doing in addition to that more now is a complete risk assessment relative to their cyber posture, to their overall technology environment. We look at the infrastructure. We look at the specific applications in a deep way, as to their rigor in the development process, their product management process. We look at the talent behind the technology and kind of do a scorecard on that. But we've had to now, because of, if they don't have cyber insurance currently, we're going to be adding it post-close. So we need to button it up and really look at, how they've managed, their environment, how vulnerable they may or may not be. And that takes a specialist to come in. We found that someone that might be good at looking at an application is not necessarily able to put a position statement together on their cyber profile. And so we've had to go out and begin to identify partners to assist with that work. It's really an important part of the diligence process now.
Yeah. And also I think you end up working with companies that want to have customers that are in other countries, right? So they have business in other countries. So that sort of touches on a lot of privacy issues that you have to consider that you would not have probably had to consider before with a business, for example, that was just in the U.S.
Yeah, there is. Because I see a lot of your thought leadership on it, just how much I think more seriously some countries take privacy and the amount of regulation that exists in those countries. I think it's certainly going to trend that way here too.
Yeah.
So we do have to think about the global implications of these businesses, and again, in the past, most of that would be focused on tax implications.
Exactly.
Now it's a much more robust risk assessment around issues of privacy.
Yeah. If you had to advise, so I work a lot with companies that are in emerging technology. So like one project I'm working on is creating privacy standards for like virtual reality or augmented reality spaces. And it's really interesting because a lot of it is about, the movement of your head, how it like takes pictures of your eyes, the listening of ambient noises in the background. All those things create a lot of privacy issues, especially I think when people think about virtual reality, they think about gaming, but actually virtual reality is really going into healthcare. So you could do, especially now with COVID, where literally someone could have you put on glasses, you're at home, and they're diagnosing you in some way. for health things. So it really is a huge area. I'd be curious to know if you were to give advice to like a young company, like an emerging technology company that's working in different spaces, and knowing that a lot of those companies are probably seeking, investor, whatever. What type of advice would you give them, especially around, privacy and technology and cybersecurity?
They're in a very high profile industry that is going to get the attention of not just the regulators, but the bad guys, right?
Yeah.
And so I think they're going to be held to a higher standard. We've seen how, facial recognition, for instance, has flaws,
right,
in terms of racial bias, and in the law enforcement circles. And I think there's a lot of companies that, we're kind of going down the path of leveraging, whether it be facial, audio, or object recognition, that are really having to think through not just the technology implications of their go-to-market, but the social implications.
Right.
So I think there's a whole other dimension of, I think, responsibility and risk management in these areas that I think that's where you need to be very sophisticated. You need to lawyer up. You need to make sure that you have the measures in place to protect yourself, and because you're going to be poked and prodded by both the good guys and the bad guys.
Yeah, I think that's true. What things, just personally, have you had concerns about related to privacy with technology in general? I know for me, I can tell you my story, but I want to hear your story first.
Yeah, no, I think the part that is a little bit scary for I think an investor, someone that grew up operating businesses and now an investor, is that if big firms firms that I really respect, like DLA Piper, Foley Lardner, Cypher, and we know these, we know in those cases, we know the CIOs, and some of the business people that sit on top of those firms are very, very good, the best in class. And if they're, getting ransomed, that is the part that does keep me up at night. What can we do to protect, not only at a system level, but at an end user level, to really kind of improve our posture, both technically, but also from a user standpoint, just creating more and more awareness. I think, now granted, these are high profile targets. There's some companies that I work with that are not as high profile, but I think anybody that's collecting any PII or, credit card information, you have to be so diligent, and it's going to take some money and talent to shore things up. So I think it's the continued attacks that are taking place in within entities that I have a great deal of respect for. That's concerning.
It is concerning. I mean, especially for a smaller business. I think we're seeing a lot of breaches in the news with these gigantic companies, and people think, "Oh my God, if it could happen to a gigantic company, like what do I have, or what can I do for myself?" So that's always interesting. I think I have a story that I want to tell. I did some research on this. I'm going to spring it on you. So over the years, we get together periodically, have breakfast, or you're like the king of the breakfast meeting. But in 2007, I lived in DC, and you sent me a message. You're like, "Hey, I'm gonna be in DC. We should hang out," and we were gonna have drinks. So we ended up. I worked near the White House at the time, and so we ended up at a bar near the White House. And You came into the bar. We were like so happy to see each other. We were just talking and laughing. And then you may not remember this. We looked around at the same time. We were like, everybody here looks miserable. It's like, what is going on? We couldn't figure out what was going on. So we started thinking about it, what was happening in Washington that day. And this was around the time that the Valerie Plame issue was going on with Scooter Libby. And Scooter Libby had been sentenced to prison for 30 months. And I think he was supposed to start his prison term the next day or something. So once we figured that out, we just could not stop laughing. It's not like we were laughing at the people. We were like, we're not from here, because we're like the only people having any fun in this bar. He actually got off. He got his sentence Bush commuted his sentence, so he didn't go to jail the next day. But those guys felt like he was going to jail. Like they thought, yeah, he's going to jail for sure.
Oh yeah, no, I remember that, and it's so interesting. You were right. I think you were right on K Street, right? I mean, you were like right in the Capitol area, and
I was on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Was it Pennsylvania? And it was. They're literally, where the Politico set hangs out. You know what bars, what restaurants, and you can almost read the tea leaves as to who's in power, what's happening based on who's in the room, who's having these sidebar conversations. And it's an exciting place. And, I'm sure that was an exciting time for you to be right in the middle of it.
Yeah, that was a very inside the beltway moment. You're like, what's going on? I would love to talk about, one thing that I'm really interested in and one thing I'm concerned about is, and you touched on it a little bit, it's kind of biometrics, facial recognition, thumb recognition, and also the bias in that where, all of us, if you have a phone, you're probably using your thumbprint or your face. And, even though there have been moratoriums on facial recognition used by some big companies of law enforcement, still being used very much commercially. So it still is like a booming industry. What are your thoughts about that? Because I feel like it's just so much more data about us is being recorded in a lot of different ways. And that's just an interesting one.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. I mean, I think that, a couple things. I think that, one of the companies that we're invested in is Authenticity. And, Mike McDonald, the founder and CEO. And what I like about his AI architecture is that it's a multi-engine based system. So, he can really kind of pick and choose the best transcription tools that are out there, the best engines that are out there for each of the use cases that he has. And, there's, I think more and more having a portfolio of engines to deal with identity issues is the right approach architecturally. I think more and more it gets overlooked. I think audio is more reliable than facial recognition, and when you put the two together, it's even more reliable. And then there's certain AI engines that are just better trained for darker skinned identification. Mm-hmm. Like there's a firm that cut its teeth in Africa and is now migrating up into the U.S. They're beginning to get some traction in the U.S. They're just superior, and their technology is superior at identifying dark-skinned people more accurately than some of the technology that was developed in North America originally. So I think it's a combination of knowing, which tools to use for which use case, and not being too tied into any one technology.
Yeah, I don't think I know that a lot of people are very much in favor of moratoriums, which, is fine. I agree that if you're using a technology in a situation where it could be harmful to someone's life, it should be accurate, right? Just like evidence.
Yeah.
But, I feel like I don't think the technology is going to go away, so it has to be improved. So I think having diverse people working on this problem is what is definitely needed. It's funny you talk about Africa. So I was a judge this morning. Well, it was a ceremony this morning. So I was judging a cyber women in Africa event, and just blown away by the talent in Africa with like cybersecurity and stuff. So that doesn't surprise me that you say that technology has come out of Africa. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to be there's going to be a whole lot of investment coming into that continent.
Yeah.
From both European investors, American investors, you name it. That's super encouraging.
Yeah, definitely. Are you seeing, I don't know if a lot of companies are very concerned, especially ones that are doing cross-border or transatlantic data transfer to the EU, about the privacy shield invalidation recently. Had you heard about this one?
No.
Well, so basically, there's this transatlantic agreement that the U.S. and the EU have tried to put together over the last 20 years. It was invalidated twice so far. The most recent one was this year. And it's really concerning because it basically puts businesses in the middle of kind of a dispute, if you will, between the EU and the US about how we handle data and do things like surveillance and stuff like that. So Wilbur Ross said that it is true that the US has about $7 trillion of commerce every year with the EU. So the invalidation of this particular thing will hamper that in some ways, especially if people from the EU or companies don't want to move data to the US. So that's a thing that's just going to play itself out. I think they're probably waiting until after the election, if it ever finishes, to see how that plays out.
Yes, I'm hoping we have a confirmed winner by Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I hope so. Thanksgiving is canceled. So. But I mean, it seems that, a lot of these private, also in the election, California just passed a new privacy regulation that creates like an agency within California to look at data privacy. So it's sort of like kind of like the GDPR in the EU, but not as robust. But it is the most robust thing that we have here in the U.S. So we'll see definitely how that happens. I would love your thoughts, though, if you have been following this at all, the antitrust suits that are happening with like Microsoft and stuff like that. Or do you have any thoughts about that?
I think regardless of who wins the White House, I think the large technology players are going to be scrutinized in 2021, and I think there should be some oversight as to what's happening, and more than anything, to make sure that the business practices are fair and reasonable, and they're creating an environment where there can be competition, there can be healthy competition. There may need to be some intervention in some cases, but I think it needs to be less political and just more about true antitrust issues, and really, I think taking advantage. I think there's some cases where you do get too big and too powerful, where you can take advantage of the end consumer. I think that that is all going to need to be scrutinized, but in a non-political way. And there's going to be a lot of attention there. And I think the part that I think will need to, the government will need to thread the needle on is not jeopardizing all of the innovation that takes place. Because we that's a strategic advantage that we have in this country. So I think that, it's really finding that balance. And, I think it's easy to begrudge a large multi-billion multinational because when you see the valuations, when you see the CEOs and the wealth that they're creating for themselves and for their shareholders, they become a target, and they have to demonstrate that they're being responsible with the power that they've accumulated, with the wealth that they've accumulated, or they'll be busted up, and that's just inevitable.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I feel like these tech companies are a different animal. So I don't, it's not like big oil where you say there are, 100 oil fields and you're going to split it up amongst, different people. They're really creating these innovations. So are you really saying you want them to give their innovation to someone else? I don't know if, having 5 Facebooks would be better than having one. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
No, they have so many resources now, whether it's Facebook or Amazon or Apple, Alphabet, Google. They will make very strong defenses on why these businesses need to stay connected and why they're interrelated. It'll be a coup for the the e-discovery professionals if there is more merger activity at a high level. I think the big deals are going to continue to be scrutinized. There's going to be more second requests in 2021.
Oh, definitely.
And a lot of lawsuits flying around as well in 2021.
Oh, I think so too. Especially, so I don't know. I don't know. These cases take so many years to go through, so it'll be a while before we get any real decision. But one thing that I think will happen, like you said, I think there'll be more scrutiny, especially as it relates to acquisitions of other companies.
Absolutely.
That's going to be a super hot area, I think. So I would love to find out if we gave you the magic wand and privacy could be just as you like it to be around the world. What would be your wish about data privacy?
I think we need to solve for this dilemma around passwords. Number one, I think there's got to be a better way to manage passwords. I think there needs to be a much more awareness around ransomware and better tools for managing those incidents, and probably a little bit more collaboration and sharing across both at a governmental level and at a kind of a compliance regulatory level across the world, because these incidents they kind of roll across the geography. You see it coming. And then I think enforcement too, when we can work together and identify the cyber criminals, they need to be, I think there needs to be coordination around that, and there needs to be, strong enforcement.
I agree. I think, at a high level, everyone around the world is experiencing the same thing. So I feel like if we could find some way, some common ground to work on this, that we'll do better as opposed to everyone trying to do their own thing across that. And then another thing, like you said about passwords, I saw I worked on a thing for MIT, and there was a statistic there. You went to MIT, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, I had a cup of coffee there. It was
Well, they had a statistic, this program that I did with them, where it said that the average person has 90 usernames or passwords. And that is not sustainable. That is not going to work. It's like all you're doing is getting more stuff and more passwords. It's like it's just not going to work. So I think the switch has to go where you as an individual will be like a bank for all your stuff, and then you decide who you're going to loan your data to back and forth. Like, to me, that's really the way that it should probably go. That's the way I think it's going to go.
Yeah, that's great. I think that especially with just the growth in fintech, everyone is so accustomed to, really doing transactions. I had a friend laugh at me the other day because I wrote a check. And was like, who uses checks anymore? And I'm like, I know, you're right. Between all the payment processing tools out there
Right.
and the fintech tools, it's digital. Digital is the way to go. And I think more and more there's going to be, I think, adoption of crypto.
Oh, totally. Oh, I could totally talk about crypto. Yes. I know. So I have friends that they're anti-crypto because of like Bitcoin and like the ransomware, but crypto is going to eat everyone's lunch. That's what I think is going to happen because I think because of COVID too, it's going to accelerate where people want more contactless payments. But the idea that you can have a currency that is worldwide and you could get people on it that are probably unbanked and underbanked, which means they get more data on those people. I mean, that's going to be crazy.
Totally agree.
So how can people contact you or reach you or figure out what you're up to?
Pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm, up there. Knox Capital, the domain is actually knox-cap.com. We try to be relatively timely on, transactions that we're involved with there, although we've closed 2 deals in 2 weeks that we haven't posted yet. We'll catch up and talk more about those in the fourth quarter. Working on a deal as well that may not close until the first quarter that's really interesting in the legal tech and services space that it'll be one of those that you'll probably text me when that gets announced. So look forward to staying in touch, Debbie. It's always great to see you.
Fantastic. I'm so happy that you were able to join the show today.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.